Hello out there, my name's Bob, and welcome back again to this ongoing series, Attack of the Rhetoric, where I use the Star Wars saga as a focusing lens to investigate history, philosophy, and literature. Today I'd like to address an issue that has troubled prequel critics over the years, especially as the Star Wars narrative and mythos continues to grow and develop. I'm referring to the complaint that the universe has gotten too small. That is to say, too many of the main characters are too closely or too personally connected with each other. As the fictional universe continues to expand, it seems doomed to collapse back in on itself, a kind of copy and pasting from the original trilogy to the prequel trilogy that diminishes the scope of the universe while stretching the limits of credulity. Hashtag Prometheus. Just saying, Ridley Scott. Please allow me to set the record straight. This issue is not an issue at all. No one would deny that the characters are certainly and necessarily interconnected, and that their reappearances are essential to the continuity of the narrative tapestry. Yet, some contend the copious coincidences and character reoccurrences are signs of unimaginative lethargy. Here are some spoilers, examples, that are frequently noted. We are surprised to learn that Boba Fett was essentially a rogue stormtrooper, that Qui-Gon Jinn had once been Count Dooku's Padawan, and that Yoda apparently knew Chewbacca, at least well enough to climb up his back. Or maybe that's just a Yoda thing. Perhaps most unsettling, we learn that Darth Vader himself built C-3PO. What? The brooding, black-armored cyborg supervillain actually built the woebegone, well-meaning, narcissistic comic relief? Not my saga, missy. But this is far, far from being a flaw. It's an integral part of all stories that gives one of the sharpest edges of plausibility to the saga. The existential, at times tragically whimsical, unaccountability of life. What follows will be specific, if not exhaustive, examples of why it's the storyteller's grandest tradition to build a narrative on the interweaving threads of the principal characters. I will give admittedly curtailed examples from myth, legend, and history. Beowulf. Beowulf's uncle Hygelac was killed by Theodebert, the grandson of Clovis I, who was the founder of the Merovingian monarchy, which, it's believed by some, carries the bloodline of Jesus Christ. In this very short poem, Beowulf sets out to aid his father's childhood friend, King Hrothgar, from the monster Grendel and his mother, who are said to be descendants of the biblical Cain. And let's face it, this first family is fraught with interconnections of its own. And what about King Hrothgar's nephew, you may well ask? The son of Hrothgar's brother, who raped his own daughter, is none other than Hrolf Kraki, the famous wolf of his own saga. Hercules. Hercules was the son of Zeus by a mortal woman. This angered his wife and sister, Hera. Hercules, as a son of Zeus, was a half-brother to a whole host of other demigods and heroes, including some of the biggest names ever. And then there's Sarpedon, who fought at Troy. He was also the son of Zeus, and was killed by Patroclus, the cousin and lover of Achilles, prompting Hector to kill Patroclus, and the rest is Hollywood. But don't confuse the Trojan Sarpedon with the eponym of the city Sarpedonia, who was killed by Hercules. Asclepius, Achilles, and Hercules were all trained by the centaur Chiron. Once trained, Hercules met a lot of people, including the titan Prometheus, who was chained to a mountain by his father Zeus. Prometheus, by the way, was the giver of fire to mortal men, and also the brother of Epimetheus, who married Pandora, who, well, trying to climb the Greek god family tree is like being hit by a cement truck full of linguine and trying to count the noodles. Alexander the Great. Socrates was a teacher of Plato, who is pretty famous for appearing in my vlog on the Sith, and was also the teacher of Aristotle, who was hired by King Philip II of Macedon to teach his little son, Alex. All of these fellows in their own right made immeasurable contributions to civilization in its entirety. Socrates was a late contemporary of the Greek statesman Pericles, who fought against Xerxes I in the Persian Wars. Xerxes was an ancestor of Darius III, who was eventually conquered by Alexander. Socrates was also a contemporary of the playwright Sophocles, who wrote a play lampooning the old head-scratcher called The Clouds. Then there was Democritus, who it is said went to Athens to meet Socrates, but was too bashful to introduce himself. And the names of contemporaries go on and on and on. Seriously, I wouldn't know where to begin to summarize their contributions to society. But you can bet it gets pretty complicated. Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar fled Rome because he refused to divorce the daughter of Cinna, who was the political enemy of the current dictator Sulla. Once Sulla died, Caesar returned to Rome and began to climb the political ranks. Caesar joined forces with Crassus and Pompey, the two most prominent men in the Republic, to take control of the Senate and form the first triumvirate. Caesar became Pompey's great rival in the Civil War after the death of his wife Julia. Julia, as the daughter of Caesar, was the principal bond between the two men. Caesar pursued Pompey to Egypt, where, after Pompey was killed, he met Cleopatra. Cleopatra was a Ptolemy, a descendant of a general that had served with Alexander the Great. Caesar was assassinated, his grandnephew Octavian, later Augustus, inherited his power. Later on, Octavian fought against Cleopatra and Caesar's former general, Mark Antony. Eventually, Augustus would have Caesar declared a god, a descendant of Aeneas, who was arguably the principal Trojan hero in the Iliad, the son of Aphrodite, and therefore de facto nephew of Hercules, and progenitor of the Roman people. The Aeneid, a sequel of the Trojan War, was written by Virgil under the reign of Augustus. Beowulf, to say nothing of Widsith, is widely accepted as having been heavily influenced by Virgil's epic masterpiece, and it was claimed by Augustus that the shooting star of 44 BC, which may have inspired the three kings to search for Christ, was the soul of Caesar ascending to godhood. King Arthur. King Uther, with the machinations of Merlin, conceives a son with his enemy's wife, Igraine. Arthur, following Merlin's urgings, pulls a sword from a stone and becomes king of the British Isles. Some legends even connect Caesar's brief invasion of Britain with King Arthur or his ancestors, or his descendants, whatever. Tragedy strikes when Arthur's best friend Lancelot falls in love with his wife, Guinevere. To make matters worse, his most treacherous enemy is his own sister, Morgan Le Fay. Arthur has a son by one or the other of his sisters, and their son, Mordred, eventually kills Arthur at the cost of his own life. And shall we enumerate the many and varied overlapping adventures of the Knights of the Round Table? Robin Hood. Robin Hood fights with King Richard during the Crusades, only to return home and find his father slain, his land stolen by Prince John, the brother of King Richard, and the Sheriff of Nottingham trying to marry Robin's childhood sweetheart, Maid Marian. Many a book has been written on the backstory of these British monarchs, but does the story itself suffer because it is directly or indirectly tied to all of European history? Does the legacy of Robin Hood, King of Good Fellows, suffer under the legacy of the Barons' Revolt or the signing of Magna Carta? All digressions aside, Robin and Marian are eventually wed in a ceremony presided over by King Richard. Some tales, like T.H. White's Once and Future King, feature Robin Hood out gallivanting around with the young Knights of the Round Table. And in Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe, Robin Hood is crossing quarterstaffs with the main character's trusty manservant. And as we watch Star Wars being handed over to Disney, I worry about what changes may come. But I just remember that old Robin has been passed down and elaborated on by the likes of Shakespeare, Ben Jonson, Tennyson, and Keats. It's exciting to see what fresh minds will make of a great epic. To wrap things up, I'd like to tell you about a party that Lord Byron threw in Switzerland. A party that could epitomize the entire intellectual atmosphere of the 18th century. Lord Byron was the father of Ada Lovelace, widely acknowledged for her early work on computer engineering. She was befriended by scribbler Chuck Dickens and electrician Mike Faraday. Percy, besides inspiring an entire generation of romanticists, was good buddies with fellow rhymester John Keats. Aspiring vampire novelist Dr. P was uncle and physician of creative siblings Dante Gabriel Rossetti and Christina Rossetti, themselves having lived in Ireland in the same building as Wild Boy Oscar and his fiancé-stealing pal Bram the Toker Stoker. Now, Percy's wife, Mary Shelley, author of the shocking horror story Frankenstein, was daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft and early utilitarian William Godwin. Willie had an ongoing bet with famous economic essayist Thomas the Mouth Malthus on the perfectibility of human society. Meanwhile, his wife Mary Wollstonecraft was having an affair with painter Henry Fuseli. Henry ran with luminaries and daydreamers like Erasmus Darwin and Tom Paine. Thomas was a pain in the neck for a pack of no-account rascals such as chemist and discoverer of oxygen Joe Priestley, and, across the pond, all of the Founding Fathers. Erasmus, on the other hand, went on to become grandfather of scientists Frank Galton and Charlie Darwin. Charlie's advocate and BFF was first agnostic Thomas Huxley, grandfather of seedy dystopian novelist Aldous Huxley, and a college professor to sci-fi scion Herbert George Wells. And that brings us pretty close to our own modern times, but I encourage you to keep following the trail on your own. These truncated examples have demonstrated through myth, legend, and history that many, many people have very few degrees of separation. It is a fundamental truth of the human condition that the most powerful and influential people form an interpersonal knot of Gordian proportions. The non-comical narrative can bump the fourth wall by sometimes allowing the audience to know more about the characters' lives than they know themselves, such that we know more about Luke and Leia's parents than they presumably ever will, and that Boba Fett's struggle for a unique identity compels him to live on the outer rims of society. And possibly most inspiring is that the projects conceived of and carried out in the innocence of our childhood can become a golden icon that shines in the darkness of our own self-destruction, that may outlive us, help and support our successors, and be a reminder that our evil deeds should not overshadow our potential for goodness. I take my leave with this quote from Russian novelist Vladimir Nabokov. "The story does not really end. For as long as people are alive, there is no possible and definite conclusion to their troubles, or hopes, or dreams." Hey, thanks for watching.